The year is 867 AD. A man kneels in the mud of a conquered city, blood and rain mixing at his feet. He is King Killer of Northumbria, and he is about to die in a way that will haunt Europe for centuries. Standing over him is a young commander who cannot walk. A man carried into battle on a shield. His name is Ivar, and they call him the Boneless. What happened next would become legend. What brought him here would become a cautionary tale for every kingdom in Christendom. This is the story of a man the sagas said could not stand, yet brought an empire to its knees, a man whose body betrayed him, but whose mind made him the most feared Viking who ever lived. If stories like this fascinate you, the kind they never taught in school, hit that subscribe button now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We're building something special here at History Without Borders. Now, let us go back to where this nightmare began. Back to the frozen shores of Scandinavia, the 9th century, a world of ice, iron, and ambition. In the lands we now call Denmark and Sweden, the Norse people carved existence from unforgiving soil. They were farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, but their sons grew restless. The land could not feed them all, so they built ships, long, shallow vessels that could cross oceans and sail up rivers into the heart of any kingdom. And among all the raiders, all the chieftains, all the legends, none loomed larger than Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar, if he existed at all, was said to have raided Paris itself. He married warrior women. He fathered sons who would shake the world. Among those sons, Björn, Ironside, Halfdan, Sigurd, Ubbe. Names that would echo through history. But one son was different. Ivar arrived into this world wrong, or so the sagas claim. His mother, Aslaug, a Volva, a seer, had warned Ragnar to wait before consummating their marriage. Ragnar did not wait, and when Ivar was born, the child's legs were twisted. Useless, cursed, they whispered, by the gods themselves. Modern historians have theories. Perhaps osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bone disease. Perhaps a form of paralysis. Perhaps the name meant something else entirely. Some scholars believe boneless referred to exceptional flexibility, a contortionist's gift. Others think it was a crude reference to impotence. The truth died with him. What the sagas agree on is this: Ivar could not fight like his brothers. He could not run. He could not stand in a shield wall. But his mind was a weapon sharper than any blade. While his brothers learned to swing axes, Ivar learned to read men, to find weakness, to plan 5 moves ahead while others saw only one. This would matter desperately when the news came that changed everything. Around 865 AD, Ragnar Lothbrok sailed to England and never returned. The accounts say his ship wrecked on the Northumbrian coast. He was captured by King Ella, a Christian ruler with no love for pagan raiders. The sagas tell us Ragnar was thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. Whether true or not, the sons believed it. And Ragnar's dying words, according to legend, were a promise. How the young pigs would grunt if they knew the situation of the old boar. Imagine being King Ella. You've just killed a raider, a nuisance. Problem solved, you think. But you've made a terrible mistake. Across the sea, Ragnar's sons received the news. The saga tells us Björn gripped a spear so hard he left fingerprints in the wood. Sigurd carved into his own hand without noticing. But Ivar said nothing. His face went from pale to red to blue, and then he simply began to plan. The revenge would not be hot. It would not be reckless. It would be absolute. In 865 AD, something unprecedented happened. The sons of Ragnar united the Viking world as never before. They assembled what the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle would call the Great Heathen Army. Not a raiding party, an invasion force. Historians estimate between 3,000 and 10,000 warriors. In 9th century terms, this was an apocalypse on the water. And at its head, carried on a shield because he could not walk, was Ivar the Boneless, the crippled king of an army that walked for him. Now imagine England in 865. It is not one kingdom, it is several. Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the middle, East Anglia in the east, Wessex in the south. They fight each other as often as they fight outsiders. They are divided. They are vulnerable. Ivar knows this. The Great Heathen Army landed in East Anglia in the autumn of 1865. The local king, Edmund, made a choice, whether wise or cowardly, history cannot say. He bought peace. He gave the Vikings horses, supplies, and shelter for the winter. In exchange, they would not burn his kingdom yet. With fresh horses beneath them and a full winter's rest behind them, the Great Heathen Army turned north in 1866. Their destination, Northumbria. Their target, King Ella. The irony is almost perfect. As Ella had killed a raider to make his kingdom safer. Instead, he had summoned an entire army. To make matters worse, Northumbria was in the middle of a civil war. Ilea was fighting a rival named Osberth for the throne. Ivar timed the invasion perfectly. He struck when his enemies were already bleeding. On November 1st, 1866, All Saints' Day, when pious Christians would be at prayer, the Great Heathen Army stormed the city of York. York, the old Roman city of Aboracum, fell in a single day. Its ancient walls, built by legions centuries before, could not stop the sons of Ragnar. For the first time, two Saxon kings united against a common enemy. Ella and Osbert put aside their rivalry. Too little, too late. On March 21st, 1867, the combined Northumbrian forces attacked York, trying to retake their capital. They breached the walls. They fought in the streets, and then the trap closed. The Vikings had let them in on purpose. It was a slaughter. Both Northumbrian kings died that day. Osbert fell in battle, but Hilla was taken alive. This was the moment Ivar had dreamed of, the man who murdered his father, now bound before him. What happened next is legendary, and almost certainly exaggerated. The sagas speak of the Blood Eagle, a ritual execution where the victim's back was carved open, ribs separated from spine, lungs pulled out and spread like wings, an offering to Odin. Whether the Blood Eagle was real or a later invention remains debated. But one thing is certain. Ella died, and he died horribly, and all of England knew it. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. This was not just war. This was terror as strategy. Ivar understood something profound. You don't need to defeat every enemy. You need to make them believe that fighting you means something worse than death. Northumbria was finished as an independent kingdom. The Vikings installed a puppet king and turned south. More kingdoms awaited. In 869, they returned to East Anglia. Remember King Edmund, the one who had paid for peace? His time had come. Edmund chose to fight this time. He was captured, and according to legend, he was given a choice: renounce Christ or die. Edmund refused. He was shot full of arrows and then beheaded. The church would later make him a saint, Saint Edmund, martyr and king. By 1870, Ivar the Boneless had destroyed 2 English kingdoms. His reputation stretched from Ireland to Byzantium. Christians added his name to their prayers. From the fury of the Northmen, deliver us, O Lord. This was not just a prayer. It was a scream. The only English kingdom still standing strong was Wessex, in the south. Their young king was named Alfred. History would later call him the Great. But that war, the final stand of Anglo-Saxon England, would fall to Ivar's brothers, because something strange happened to Ivar around 870. He vanished from the English chronicles. Some say he went to Ireland, where he ruled as King of Dublin. The Irish annals record a King Ivar dying in 873. Was Ivar the same man as Ivar? Probably. The timelines fit. The descriptions match. The terror was identical. The Irish called him King of the Northmen of all Ireland and Britain. Even his title demanded recognition of his reach. And then, in 873, he died. The circumstances are lost to us. No saga records his final moments. No chronicle describes his burial. A man who shook the foundations of kingdoms simply stopped. Perhaps his body finally betrayed him completely. Perhaps an old wound. We will never know. But his legacy was written in blood, in stone, and in fear. His brothers continued the war against Wessex. They would eventually lose to Alfred the Great. But the damage was done. Half of England would remain under Viking control for nearly a century. The Danelaw, they called it. Norse law, Norse language, Norse blood. Cities like York, which the Vikings renamed Jorvik, became centers of Viking culture. You can still find their traces today. Place names ending in by and thorpe, villages and farms are Norse. Derby, Whitby, Scunthorpe. The invaders named the land, and the name stuck. But more than territory, Ivar left behind a legend. The crippled boy who became the most feared man in Europe. The sagas made him supernatural. A berserker who could not be wounded. A sorcerer who cursed his enemies. A demon in human form. The truth was probably simpler and more impressive. He was a strategist in an age of brute force. He was patient when others were reckless. He turned his weakness into strength. Unable to fight in a shield wall, he learned to command it. Unable to walk, he was carried by an army that worshipped him. In 1686, a farm in Repton, England uncovered a mass grave. 250 Viking warriors, all buried around a single figure. That central figure was 9 feet tall, his bones arranged and supplemented with animal bones. A warrior so important that even in death, he had to be made impressive. Some historians believe this may have been Ivar himself. A man whose broken body was enhanced after death to match his legend. We cannot prove it, but we can wonder. Today, Ivar lives on in ways his victims never imagined. Television shows, video games, novels. We are still telling his story, still fascinated by the monster. Perhaps that is the strangest victory of all. 1,000 years later, we remember his name. How many of his victims can we name? History has a way of remembering the bold, the ruthless, the exceptional, even when they are monsters. Ivar the Boneless was not a hero. He was not a liberator. He was a conqueror who destroyed kingdoms for revenge and glory. But he was also a man who refused to accept the limits others placed on him. A man whose body said no while his mind said everything. And that, perhaps, is why we still tell his story. Because somewhere in the darkness of history, there is something we recognize. The will to overcome. The hunger for power. The desire to be remembered. These are not Viking traits. These are not medieval traits. These are human traits, amplified to their terrible extreme. The crippled boy became the fear of Europe. The man who could not walk brought kingdoms to their knees. His story asks us uncomfortable questions. What are we capable of when we refuse to accept defeat? And what price are we willing to make others pay for our victories? Ivar the Boneless has been dead for over 1,000 years, but his question still echoes across the centuries, waiting for each of us to answer.